With that, I'm done with the risk management, and I'm open for questions. These are my contact details. You can drop a mail to me if you like to have this PPT or the PDF with you, and then you can connect with me on LinkedIn. And this is my blog. You can look at that. Keshav, I'm done with my presentation.
Yeah, Mr. Prasad, we have already shared the questions with you. Please take the questions.
We'll go one by one. I will. Okay. Somebody asked Ithika Saxena, who is responsible for risk management, business analyst, project manager, or both? So I would not type it. I'm going to answer it over the phone. Is that right, Keshav? Yeah, I would assume it's right. So Ithika Saxena, to answer your question, who is responsible for risk management? Absolutely, it's going to be project manager, because the project manager has the complete responsibility and then accountability if something goes wrong. It would never be the business analyst. And it can't be both, because project manager got the ultimate responsibility for the success or failure of the project, not the business analyst. However, business analyst is the stakeholder. The second question is it necessary to have RMP in every project? I believe it was asked by Mr. Umesh Gaikwad. Is it necessary to have RMP in every project? RMP, I believe, is referring to risk management plan. It is not necessary because all the standards and the framework we would only use if it is required. And suppose if a project is got, let's say, a lot of stakeholders, and then it is very high value project and then tight timelines, yes, it is absolutely required to have the risk management plan. But however, if you are trying to deliver a project for very low value and then the number of stakeholders are very less, and then it is going to just go for 2 to 3 weeks, and it is not required for you to do the risk management planning for 1 week and then struggling to deliver the project in next 1 week. So it's not required. So I'm going to skip that Ithika's next question. I'll come back if the time is available. So Shefalika Srivastava, this person asked, impact matrix, is it a manual work done by manager, and what are the parameters to define it? So impact matrix, so I did share one impact kind of a template, and it's a template, it's a kind of reference document. So this reference document, again, it varies from project to project and organization to organization. What I mean by this is, suppose 10% slippage in cost might be high impact for one project versus it could be low impact for other project. So this is all how it is going to be defined by the project manager or the project team. I think to answer the question, is it a manual work? Yes, of course it is a manual work unless there is an automated template. Murali Krishna asked a question. He asked, how is technical environment different from technical architecture? Can't we club these two? Again, it depends on the, sometimes, I mean, some organizations, they might say technical environment is part of the architecture. Again, there is no right or wrong answer. It depends on what is the scope the organization or the solution architect is going to define as part of the technical architecture. Suppose the solution architect says that technical environment and infrastructure are part of the technical architecture, yes, they can be combined. And some people, they might only say that, suppose if somebody is doing service-oriented architecture, and they might say that only software, the kind of software architecture that I'm going to use is a technical architecture. Anything related to the infrastructure, I would put into environment. So again, it's up to the person to define it. So that is answer to Murali Krishna. Lavanya Krishna asked, how the risk impacts are decided, namely cost impact, schedule impact, scope impact, quality. I think as I showed that particular matrix, unfortunately I could not remember the slide number, but if you probably, let me refer back. So you can quickly look at slide number. I mean, not now because we will not be able to look at, but slide number 7. I try to give sample definitions of impact. Again, as I said, it is up to the project manager to define the kind of percentages and impact, whether it is high impact or low impact. So that is to Lavanya. And Sitaram Kulkarni asked one more question. What is the method to find out impact? I meant for attrition at 0.7. How this number came? So again, as I said, the impact, it's up to the project manager to decide. However, I'm going to say how somebody can decide. Absolutely, one thing is the past history. When I say past history, let's say you did some 10 projects, and because of the attrition, say 70% of the projects they were impacted, you can say straight away, yeah, the impact is going to be. This is not the right thing to do, but this is not the only thing to do. You can have multiple things. Or sometimes what might happen is, though there is attrition, your team actually they came as a the remaining people they came as a single team, and then a lot of synergy, and then you were able to deliver successfully. That could also happen. So one is past history, and one more is obviously there should be some futuristic view. You can also say that even though this happens, my team is highly motivated enough to do the things. Then it might say that 0.7 might come to 0.5. So that's basically the past history, and then your futuristic view of your team. Puneet Gupta asked this question. Let me read this. I have a question on P&I analysis, which is how do we identify positive and negative impact? So this particular thing pretty much talks about the negativity, not the positive. So positive thing also you can use it, but only thing is probably high. When I say high negative, when I say negative, and it is a high number, it's going to be red. But in the positive thing, it is high, then I would say green. So you just need to reverse both the things. But whatever the P&A matrix that I showed, it's mainly for the negativity, not for the positive thing. And Lavanya Krishnan asked one more question. She asked, what is escalation threshold? Escalation threshold in risk management, and how it is calculated. Escalation threshold. I could not understand the question, but I would think that what is the point that you need to go and escalate? So this is again, it depends on how experienced the project manager is. If the project manager, and then the kind of authority the project manager would carry. Suppose for any risk, if the organization says that the project manager stands accountable for it, so probably the escalation that is going to go and then do is going to be very limited, because he has all the authorities to go and do. Versus some organizations, it might so happen that project manager is just a project coordinator, then he or she would not have complete authority on what's happening and what's going to happen. So again, it depends on the situation. I'm going to skip Lavanya's next question. I'm going to answer Ashok Das asked some question. When client not provided, I think it's provided sufficient information, but at the time of acceptance they denied for acceptance, who is responsible for the risk? So I think it's very simple because it was not captured in the requirement. Yes, so when it is suppose if you try to do something which is not part of the requirement, it's called gold plating in the project management terminology. You would not even do this. So again, it's absolutely project manager's responsibility to document all the requirements. That's where the documentation is going to come into picture. So if the client says that he or she had said something, and then the only way which they can deny that they did not do the thing is they can probably point to a document and say that, yeah, this is the requirement document, and whatever I said is not there, so we did not deliver. However, the project manager can counter argue saying that, yeah, this is what which I documented, then there is no question. So again, I think, as I said, ultimate responsibility comes back to the project manager. What type of quantitative analysis technique used most frequently by you? Unfortunately, I did not use many quantitative techniques, because most of the times with the qualitative analysis itself we will be able to find out. However, some of the things like wherever there is a data, wherever there is a data, suppose I have been in the industry for quite some time, and then suppose if I have the data related to one particular technology for let's say 2 to 3 years, then I would go and then use the quantitative data. Sujit, and I think as an industry, quantitative data, quantitative analysis, very less people do, especially in IT. But however, if it is related to the banking or insurance or the credit card, yes, they do have a lot of data. That's where the quantitative analysis is going to be more relevant, mainly from the business perspective. But when it comes to IT perspective, as you know, Indian IT is kind of a maturing industry. Unfortunately, we do not have great amount of data for us to back up with some numbers. Sujit Kede. So he asked, suppose your project budget is fixed, suddenly some risk comes into picture. How to handle this issue? So yeah, I think it's an interesting question, and it might happen as well. So what happens is typically a good sponsor. When it's a good sponsor, the sponsor is going to give money to the project. The sponsor ideally should keep some money, which it is called management reserve. So which means that as an example, if I say, so as a project manager, I was allocated with a project which is 10 million pounds worth, and ideally the sponsor will have to keep some 10%, let's say 1 million pounds as the management reserve. However, I do not have access to those funds, but suddenly I know that my budget is always 10 million pounds, and then suddenly some risk comes, and then I should not be handicapped to deliver the project. I go back to the sponsor and say that yes, there is a risk which came in, and then I need your help. That's called management reserve. The reason it is called management reserve is project manager would never have the access to that unless sponsor provides it. Versus contingency money, project manager will have the access. So that's the difference. I will ask Nilesh S asked one question. I'm not able to spell the second name. Sorry, Nilesh. What is the typical frequency of risk monitoring and who should be involved? I think again it depends on the project. Suppose if the project is very critical, there were occasions where in one of the projects that we did 2 years back, we did the risk analysis almost daily, first 1 month, because that is a new technology for us, and then there is a wide impact to the stakeholders. Versus some of the projects which we had done, let's say if I pick up my projects which we run on mainframes, so maybe I do not do very tight risk management because we have been doing delivering projects on mainframes for 10-12 years, so we know that it's going to work most of the times. So that's where I think we'll reduce the frequency. And Narasimha Murthy Vadlamani asked some question. He did not ask a question. He said, "Thank you, Ravindra." Thanks, Narasimha Murthy. And Anupam asked one question. How do you use the float for contingency planning in network diagram? How do you use float for contingency planning in network diagram? I think I wish to answer this, but because lack of time, I need to give a little bit more explanation on the network diagram, which I need to go back to the time management. Anupam, apologies, but I can probably drop a mail to you. Apologies for that because it requires more time. Let me look at anything which I can answer quickly. Ashok asked some question. So I think I answered Ashok's question earlier. So I skipped one question which was asked by Ikita Saxena earlier. Let me do it. During and after which phase risk management is done and it is reviewed and modified if requirement get changed. During, after, I think she wanted to ask which phase risk management is done. I think, yeah, what is the phase that we do? As I said earlier, in the project management we have 5 phases. If you could recollect or recall, we have initiation, planning, execution, monitoring and control, and then the closing. It is really important that we do extend at least in the monitoring and control, not necessarily closing. Yes, closing is also important, but closing just before that, whatever we do in the project, either we are initiating the project, we are doing the planning, executing, monitoring and control, all the places we need to really do the risk management, or identify the risk. So it might happen that even the last day we would come up with some risk. So that is important. I think I answered all the questions. Other than Anupam, can you drop a mail to me, Anupam? I'll answer that question. And otherwise, if you can post onto the website, I'll answer that straight away. Puneet asked one question. I have a question on this penny matter, which is how I think I did say this. Sitaram Kulikarni. I think I answered all the questions. Yes. Keshav, I think I'm done.
Now we will end the session.
Keshav, are you there? Keshav, are you there?
He's speaking. Thanks, Mr. Prasad, for your informative session on project risk management. It was indeed an enlightening session. I would also like to thank our participants for their support in making this webinar a huge success. The recording of this webinar would be available on techic.com by tomorrow. The next session in the Software Project Management webinar series is happening on 6th of December, 3 p.m. Topic: Agile Model Management, Paradigm Shift of Generation X Project Management. Speaker: Prasad Prabhakaran, Program Management at Symphony Service Corporation Private Limited. So see you all on Tuesday at 3 p.m. Have a nice day. Thank you.